Hey beauty, in this episode I talk about 8 tips to stop internalizing hurt before it turns into sickness. I am not an expert in this area, but we can learn together, right? So I hope that you enjoy this episode. I just want to remind you again, if you have not joined my free Facebook group, go to facebook.com/group/her holistic healing. I would love to meet you, pray with you. We can share health tips and network together. So I hope to see you in there. Let's start the show. Welcome to Her Holistic Healing. Do you want more energy and less anxiety so that you can do all the things? Are you searching for meal ideas, essential oils, and other holistic treatments? Do you wish you could know which direction to take with your health so that you could finally feel better? Hey, I'm Alexandra. I love Jesus. I'm a wife, mom of 3, and registered nurse with years of experience in clinical research. I also wanted more energy so that I could have more fun and keep up with my growing child. I too was confused about all the different diet and treatment options. I too wanted to wake up every day and feel good, but I felt anxious because I couldn't solve the mystery of my health. Until God showed me that He is the source of true healing. In this podcast, you will learn holistic treatments and Bible truths that will lead you to the peace, joy, and freedom that you have been hoping for. So what do you say we take a break from the mind-numbing humdrum busyness? Let's rest and let God be our healer and helper. Someone asked me to do a podcast episode about how to not internalize hurt, which turns into sickness. When I heard this, I thought, man, that is such a great topic. But then I thought, I am so unqualified to talk about this. But in the past couple weeks, I was thinking about this a lot. So I feel like this episode is for you and for me. So here are 6 tips to stop internalizing hurt before it turns into sickness. Before I get into these tips, I just want to say that if you're dealing with any kind of habitual physical or mental abuse, I really do hope that you get help from a pastor or a therapist, psychologist, someone to help you get out of the situation, at least temporarily, or just to help you deal with it. I know that every situation is different, so I want to say that before I get started. So here's the first tip. Number 1, when you're hurt, be completely honest and vulnerable with God. This is one of the best tips that I've ever been given. I was working with this Christian life coach, and I was telling her that I really want to hear more from God. How do I get closer to God? And she said, and I asked her, how did you do it? And she said, I just started to get really super honest with God. So I took her advice, and there was this one night where I was just really upset and hurt about something, and I went to God and I told him everything that I felt. I was completely honest about everything that I was feeling. I talked to him just like I do a best friend, even more so, because I told him things that I wouldn't even tell anyone else. So after that, I just felt so comforted. I just want to read to you from Matthew 11. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. I just love this passage so much. When we go to God, we will find rest and we will find comfort. Tip number 2, when we're hurt, we need to remember to put our trust in God instead of people. A lot of times when we're hurt, it's either because someone has not met our expectation or because our ego has been hurt, right? So we just have to remember that we can't put our trust in people, even if it's our husband or a best friend, a mentor. People are always going to let us down, right? Because no one is perfect. That's why we need to always remember that those people aren't aren't God. We shouldn't idolize them. We shouldn't put unfair expectations on other people. We can't fully trust in other people, but we can trust in God completely. Tip number 3, when we're hurt by someone, it helps to be curious and have compassion. When I started doing this, when I'm hurt by someone, I try to imagine what their childhood was like. I wonder if maybe their parents were really mean or abusive or neglectful. It kind of makes me think about my kids and what it would be like for me to picture them being abused. And then, so it kind of makes me think of this adult in front of me that's hurting me. It makes me think of them as a child, and then it helps me to have compassion for them. I don't know if you want to do that, but it helps for me to think about my kids, or for me to think about that particular person as a child and try to have compassion on that person that is probably dealing with trauma in their past, things that they haven't dealt with completely. Tip number 4, we need to remember that we are all sinners. I think if you've grown up in church, I grew up in church, it's kind of, people in church tend to rank certain sins, but God doesn't do that, right? It's kind of acceptable, unfortunately, to have pride even when you're in church, or other, quote, acceptable sins that are really not acceptable to God. So when someone hurts you or sins against you, it's helpful to remember that we're all sinners, right? Tip number 4, we need to remember who we are because of Christ. So let me read to you who you are because of Christ. You can turn to Ephesians 1 or 1 Peter chapter 2, Matthew 5, Psalm 139. Remember, when someone has hurt you and maybe you feel ashamed or you think less of yourself, just remember that you are blessed with every spiritual blessing in the heavenly places. You are chosen, you are precious, you are one of God's people. Remember that you are holy and blameless before God because of Christ's sacrifice. Remind yourself that you have been adopted by God. You are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation. You have been redeemed and forgiven. You are an heir. You are the salt of the earth and the light of the world. You are beautiful. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. You are God's masterpiece. Number 6, when people hurt you, we need to remember to forgive them, and we need to remember to forgive ourselves. God has been showing me that when I am feeling bitter or resentful, sometimes it's because I'm not forgiving myself. I'm not receiving the forgiveness that God wants to give me. When we mess up, the truth is that the blood of Christ covers that mess up, right? So if we don't accept that for ourselves, in my opinion, it's hard for us to extend forgiveness to others. When we truly accept the truth that we're forgiven, we're redeemed, that we're not condemned, we're in this posture of just being so grateful by this amazing grace that we more willingly, in my opinion, want to extend forgiveness to others. Tip number 7, I said there were 6, but I had to stop this recording and I thought of another one. Tip number 7, know your triggers and take every thought captive. This is something that I would really recommend to you. Write down all your triggers. Write down what makes you angry, what makes you scared, upset, etc. Write them all down. ask God to help reveal to you why you're triggered by these things. Examine why you feel a certain way. Replace those. It usually comes from a lie. Replace those lies with the truth. I'll give you an example. Back in 2020, I was just angry, and a lot of times our anger is a cover-up for fear or shame or something else, right? So in 2020, I was really angry, and it was because I was scared because of the state of the world, right? Everything going on. I was triggered by so many things, the news and just so many things, right? When I look back at it now, I realize that I was triggered so much because I was scared, and I wasn't filling my mind with the truth that God is sovereign. He's on the throne. No matter what happens, He is still good, and He loves me, and He has always been there for me, and that He'll continue to be there for me. If I let Him, He'll give me that joy and peace that I want. I used to watch America's Next Top Model. I don't know if it's still on the air, and I don't recommend it to you, but I used to watch that show. And you know how when you watch reality shows, there's a lot of times dysfunctional people on the show that they've been hurt so much that even if you give them the slightest bit of feedback, they just go crazy. They just take it completely in a negative way. And a lot of times we're like that with our triggers, right? We might be hurt by what someone says to us, but sometimes those things that they're saying are just neutral, right? But because we haven't dealt with our past, we take it completely the wrong way, like we twist it in our heads. Which leads me to number 8. I was only supposed to have 6, but I just thought of another one. Number 8, we need to address past hurt and trauma. This is related to number 7 that I was talking about, knowing our triggers. The reason why sometimes we're just so hurt is because someone is like, sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally, pressing on a hurt that hasn't been healed, right? So I highly recommend seeing a therapist or a pastor or a mentor. If you have not heard episodes 30 and 31, my guest was Keisha Wright. She helps women and men with past hurt and trauma. So I highly recommend that you give those episodes a listen if you have not heard those yet. So just to recap, 8 tips to stop internalizing hurt before it turns into sickness. Tip number 1, be completely honest and vulnerable with God. Tip number 2, trust in God instead of people. Number 3, be curious and have compassion. Number 4, remember that we are all sinners. Number 5, remember who you are because of Christ. Number 6, forgive yourself and forgive others. Number 7, know your triggers and take every thought captive. Tip number 8, address past hurt and trauma. I'm so glad that you took the time to listen today. If you like what you heard, will you leave me a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts so that this show can reach more people? And if you want to connect with me, go to herholistichealing.com. Before you go, I want to leave you with one of my favorite passages from Matthew 29. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls.
For you, it's easy and my burden is light.